first thing I want to say is that I've been a librarian now since 1974, and I absolutely adore my profession. I'm as passionate about it now as I am when I started. It is an absolutely wonderful profession. I cannot think of any other way I would have wanted to have spent my career. I have an 18-year-old son. He wants to be an architect, but by God, he'd be a great librarian. And I tell him that. My wife is a librarian as well, and one thing I should tell you is that she started life as an academic librarian, then worked as a public librarian for about 15 years, and now she's a dean at a college and is responsible for academic computing and for libraries. So you can switch those sectors as well, and I think that's one thing that is probably important to mention. At the same time, I am exceptionally glad that I've spent my life in public libraries, because the business of the organization, the business of the institution is the provision of library services, and I like that. I think that that's a great way to sort of spend your days. I also believe enormously in its future. I think we have a great future, and that one of the nice things about being a public sector institution such as a library is that there is competition, and there is competition in other areas, and we're aware of it. And it means that you are more future-oriented, you are more change-oriented than some other areas of public service. And in fact, lots of areas in the city keep turning to us and saying, my God, you're using a lot of technology. Gee, you're managing to do this, you're doing that type of thing. And a lot of it is because we have to be responsive to our customers, because if we're not, then they really won't be there. And an example of that is that a year ago, of course, we did not offer ebooks. Ebooks now outperform 3 of our smallest branches in terms of circulation per month. So it's in 1 year you've gone from 0 up to that level of business. So it's quite a remarkable change in the business itself. One thing that I always say to students, so it's easy for me to say, is that your first job is enormously important. I was exceptionally lucky. My first job was at the Lethbridge Public Library in Alberta. The chief librarian was 29. The deputy chief librarian was 28. I was 27. And one of the great things about it was, while there was an awful lot that we didn't know, that sort of enthusiasm, the ability to make mistakes, because they talk sometimes about how, oh, don't worry about your mistakes, risk, you've got to go out there and do things. Well, we weren't afraid of any of risk, and we weren't afraid of doing all that stuff because we didn't know any better. And so that generated a certain enthusiasm. And I often say that's the job that sort of made me as a librarian, because, I'm now much more, I'm not risk adverse, some staff would say, at all, in terms of some of those areas. So the other thing I'm going to comment, and I agree with all of the comments that have been made about what we're looking for, is that one of my friends is Jenny Cooper. She's the chief librarian at the Washington, D.C. District of Columbia Library System. We have an odd relationship because my best friend when I was growing up became her best friend as an adult, and then we became best friends and fought over that best friend, who is now faded into the background, and Jenny and I are best friends. So it's kind of strange, But Jenny is the first person who ever said to me at one time, she said, every time we hire a librarian, it's $1 million decision because of how long they're likely to stay inside the organization. And I thought, oh my God, she's right. So how much care and attention do you actually spend on $1 million decision inside the organization and inside the decision? So we decided that we would spend a lot more time on the intake of librarians and spending more time. And certainly, and I agree with the comment, you're not just hiring them for the first job. You're hiring them for the second job. You're hiring them for the third job. You're hiring them for the management potential. You're hiring people that exhibit an ability to learn themselves, to keep on learning. One of the questions we will always ask you is, how do you keep your information base up to date? And you better not just say, oh, I read, I talk to friends. You've got to have a distinct ability or history or background that shows you keep those types of skills up to date when you're doing it. The jobs have changed a lot, and I'm going to give you an example in terms of a specific example. 20 years ago, we had a health librarian position. We still have a health librarian position. But 20 years ago, the health librarian's position probably would have been working on the desk for 20 hours, spending a lot of time building the print collection of medical information and material, and then hopefully every once in a while, somebody, when she was working on the reference desk, might ask a question that dealt with the sort of health area. But if she wasn't there, then people would sort of flounder through and deal with those resources as best they could. Now, what happens when you have a health librarian position is there is some component of the print collection, but not very much at all. There's not as much desk time as there was before. a lot more time spent training other staff in terms of the use of the electronic resources and material, and a lot more time spent working with the other community groups that are involved in healthcare. So that, for example, on our website, there is a health component of it where you can go and link into all those resources, do the doctor finder, talk about all of that type of online information.